Okay, well, geez, I was born and raised here in San Francisco, California. Went through the public schools. Did a little bit of college prep work at the San Mateo College for reserve police officers training, but I couldn't afford the academies. They're rather expensive. I ran for U.S. Congress as a Republican back in 1996, and again back in 1998 against Tom Lantos. Actually did pretty good the first time. I actually pulled over 126,000 votes. Um, I started to go into researching Nibiru and the Anunnaki because of things I was seeing up on YouTube. Some of the YouTube videos back in 2006, 2007, they were showing sky coordinates, and they were showing something really interesting. A lot of these were images that were being shown on worldwide telescope from one company, from Microsoft, and then from Google Earth Sky. Back then, they actually had several nice images that were showing something that just you couldn't see because it looked like someone took a black marker to it, circling around it. And I sent the sky coordinates to a friend over in NASA, and he sent me back a really nice DSS image. Now, a DSS image is a image that you would see directly through a telescope. So this image was showing 5 things orbiting around nothing. Now, your listeners probably know that a DSS image cannot show a brown dwarf. Brown dwarfs can only be seen in infrared. And later I got those images. So between that and then accidentally stumbling into NASA recording these massive, now technically all I can say is they are anomalies / UFOs. That's exactly what they call them on the internet. I can call them what I want, and I can call them that they're actually massive motherships coming into our system. NASA has been recording these things and other things since 1998 with their SOHO satellite, which is 4 times the distance away from the Earth of the Moon. So 4 times the distance of the Moon to the Earth's out there in a Lagrange point. These are multi-million-dollar or billion-dollar camera systems. They're not like what you or I would carry in our hand and look up in the sky. Oh, that's a nice white object. That's a UFO. No, these are very good images. And NASA has been cleaning up all the glitches on SOHO up until 2012. And supposedly these things should not be seen anymore.
And don't forget, they just landed a some kind of orb of some sort, or
it was a probe.
A probe. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
On an asteroid, I think it was, right? Or a comet.
And it was a comet. Way the heck out there that supposedly took them 10 years to even get there. And that shows how good our technology has come, either because we did it on our own, which I would like to believe, but I'm sorry, I don't believe all of it. Reverse engineering of the stuff that we have found since Roswell clearly shows that we have other things that make NASA look like little child's play.
Well, Robert, what do you think could be the real reason they're so anxious to land on a comet? Could it be that comet is in the vicinity of what they're trying to see?
I honestly don't know. I would probably be just really super guessing right now, and I really hate doing that with all the stuff that I want your listeners to even try and listen to me about. I'm not going to tell them that they should believe this, but I want to put it in their brains to think about it. So many things are happening. So many things have happened since 1954, 1955 with the Vatican, the Jesuits, Jesuit leaks, a former pope which just resigned, complaining about the Jesuits and their ET agenda, which backs up everything that was leaked in the early 2000s about a high-ranking Jesuit priest telling everything to an Italian reporter. You're just barely touching on everything that's around here, I swear.
Yeah.
So just go ahead and ask me some questions. I'll answer them as best way I can.
All right. Well, I guess I'll ask the obvious question: is where the hell is this thing, and when can we expect it?
Okay, the thing I think you're talking about is Nibiru.
That's correct.
Nibiru orbits around a brown dwarf, which is a companion to our sun. Most star systems have a binary, which means you have two suns of almost the same size. Our sun has at least one brown dwarf, which has up to 7 planets orbiting around it. Nibiru has always been called the planet of the crossing. So if you take this brown dwarf with its 7 planets and its Oort cloud, just like our system has an Oort cloud way out there past Pluto, and Nibiru orbits into and through our system between Jupiter and Mars, that's clearly the planet of the crossing. No ifs, ands, or buts right there. My opinion, I could be speculating, and a lot of people want me to say, hey, I'm speculating. I don't really know. I've just been researching the holy heck out of this stuff for years, between when was the last time it was here, how it orbits around our system. If any of your listeners can go to YouTube, they can call up Nemesis, Nemesis, our sun's evil twin, and it pops up. It's like a 45-minute video, and it clearly describes everything about how a brown dwarf and its system is much larger than our system, and it orbits around our system.
Well, how do we know? How do we know any of these people who put out videos or any of that stuff? How do we know that they're right?
Well, the people that are in that video are all well-known scientists. The photographs I have showing the brown dwarf and its 5 inner planets was leaked directly from NASA back during 2007, 2008 from the South Pole Telescope. And supposedly that was on its orbit as the whole thing was orbiting around. See, Nibiru, okay, Dr. Robert S. Harrington used to work for the Naval Institute back there in Washington, D.C. Supposedly, NASA gave him and several other scientists their own groups, and they were to look into this stuff. Because NASA accidentally, on its first try in 1983, found something of a very massive heat signature out beyond Pluto. They said it was between 4 to 8 times the size of our planet, and blah, 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 blah. And they jumped the gun, and they called a news conference. Then 3 days later, they retracted it, saying these guys didn't know what they meant. Blah, blah, blah. Don't listen to them. Well, Dr. Robert Harrington found out enough between 83 and I think 92. And just like in the movie 2012, when the guy from the Louvre is accidentally taken out because he was going to file a news conference, Robert Harrington was about ready to do the exact same thing.
Well, you know, Robert, we see that in a lot of situations. And like, look at the woman who was in charge of the records in Hawaii. How, you know, it's kind of funny how she goes down in an airplane and gets wiped out when she knew the truth about Obama.
Yeah, I've heard different there's a whole list of famous astronomers who supposedly have been looking into this thing since way back in the 50s, 40s, 60s, 70s, and anytime they started to get really super close, they accidentally died. They had this, they had that. Now, is this to say that the powers that be are taking them out? I don't know.
The powers that be are dark powers, let me tell you that.
Well, yes. I mean, President Truman, back towards the end of World War II and into the last part of his presidency, for one reason or another, he created Majestic 12, a very secret group that would handle anything dealing with aliens or flying saucers. Now, when President Eisenhower met with 3 alien races in 1954. Now, this has been reported on several different sites. He also had his spiritual advisor, which was then the Bishop of Los Angeles, Francis McIntyre. He had him there at the same time. And Francis McIntyre was so scared after what he saw for 2 days, he refused to be sworn that he would never talk to anyone about this, even God. Bad mistake. He raced all the way over to Rome, told Pope Pius XII that, hey, Pope, look what just happened. They actually had 2 alien races living here on the earth that you couldn't tell from anyone walking down the street. And Pope Pius put an archbishop over him and made a joint venture between the United States and the Vatican. And he actually met with the Anunnaki themselves, just like Eisenhower did in early '55. Pope Pius described them as being a warrior race. Now, what he meant by that, I have no idea, but I mean, if I were to meet, like, say, the ancient Romans, and they've got shields and the way they talk, the way they act, they were clearly a warrior race, or any of the other beings that lived way back then. So, you know, we've got this stuff, and if you just had to take that on one hand, all right, it's all BS. Someone just makes this up. But then this poor guy that actually went there to the same meetings, I think his name was Gerald Light. He actually, after signing everything, swearing this, and that, and he got back home, he wrote to a friend of his. And his letter still exists. His friend died years ago, from what I understand. His wife found it. And I have a copy of that up on my webpage, which is www.starshipsaroundthesun.com. It's right there on my front page where you can actually read it. And this guy just goes into stuff that was not in any book, movie, or story at that time. He talked about the dematerialization of solid objects, and this hand-picked Western team of just the highest scientists that Eisenhower could get. They all looked like they had their jaw on the floor because they'd never seen anything like that. And that never showed up in any story until Star Trek. Well, 10 years later.
Well, yeah, I need to still see that. You know, I've looked for it a few times online, and I end up with some garbage that somebody, you know, title's wrong. But if this thing is, if Nibiru, if Planet X, whatever you guys want to call it, anybody, there's so many names for it. If this thing is
there is.
If it's in our solar system, and I mean, it's close enough where it's going to affect us soon. Like, I've had many who've told me it's out somewhere in between Jupiter and Saturn and out that way. And I'm thinking, if it gets anywhere close, even to where, say, Jupiter is from us, then we would be able to see it, because the sunlight, it would then, you know, catch light, just like Jupiter
Exactly. Is. And that is where there's a small problem. All of the ancient documents all said that the people could see a massive red thing in the skies. They could see it. It actually filled the skies from horizon to about halfway up in the skies. Now, if Nibiru is 4 times the size to 8 times the size of our planet, which would make it roughly around the size of Jupiter, that wouldn't do that. Okay? Any of your listeners would say,
well, Jupiter, I think, is about, isn't it like 100 times or more? How many? What do you, Rascal? How many Earths can you fit in Jupiter? I think it's.
I think it's in the thousands.
I thought it was 100 or 1,000. I can't remember. I'm going to guess probably about 1,000.
Yes. So, but the people back, and the dates are firmly locked in. The last time it came here was between 1600 BCE and 1558 BCE. It was seen for 9 to 10 days in the Earth's skies over Egypt during the Exodus of the Hebrews from Egypt, with whatever persons the Bible says it was Moses. The ancient Egyptian version from Ippawur says it was a priest prince from the inner courtyard of Pharaoh who led the slaves and evildoers out of Egypt while all this stuff was happening. And in his account, he describes exactly what's in the Bible. Exactly. Except for all the stones coming down. They destroyed the palace of Pharaoh, which was a Hyksos pharaoh, not an Egyptian pharaoh. The Hyksos ruled Upper Egypt between the 12th dynasty and the end of the 17th Egyptian dynasty.
You know, what if these pyramids actually were designed for certain selected people to survive the apocalypse? What if these were, what if these are like the underground bunkers our governments are doing now? You know, what if it's something like that?
It's hard to say. A lot of scientists have been saying that the pyramids were actually some kind of a power source. Reading Lost Book of Enki by Sitchin, they never mention it in there, but they do mention that these hills were made there in Egypt. They called them hills in the books in the Lost Book of Enki by Sitchin. Now, in the stories from ancient astronauts, there was one show a while back where this one gentleman, he found out that a pyramid shape actually gives off a form of energy that kind of looks pointing skywards. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, no, we're good.
Well, I was going to say something.
Oh, okay. Rascal was going to say something. Go ahead.
I was going to share something with you. I've done some research on the pyramids because it intrigues me because I touched a pyramid as a child. I was born in Cairo. I was born in Egypt, and my dad took me out to see the pyramids, and I touched it, and I got a very, very strange feeling. And it was unique because my dad touched it and didn't feel it, but I touched it, and it wasn't my imagination. There was a unique energy there, and so I've done some research on them, and I found that. According to one of the documentaries that I read and watched, they did generate electricity. We found that the Nile was actually much, much closer to the pyramids than it is now, that over the centuries it has moved away. But they've also shown, scientists have shown, that if you have running water and sunlight, you can generate electricity, and that's exactly what they had. They had running water, sunlight, and then they had probes. If you look at the diagrams of the pyramid, you'll see that the pyramids go down underground as well.
Yes.
That portion that went underground had something to do with the generation of electricity. Along with that, it also generated a frequency that would give people, generally speaking, a euphoric feeling. And from what I understand, this feeling or this resonance that went out was over a span of over 40 or 50 miles. So anybody who lived within 40 or 50 miles of the Great Pyramids always had this euphoric feeling. It was almost like being on drugs. Well, you didn't need to be on drugs because your body can manufacture that drug, and through this resonance, your body is manufacturing that drug.
Yeah, understood. Yeah. Now, what happened during Ipuwer's account was very clear. It was the Egyptian account. He was a highly trained Egyptian scribe, and what he did was he wrote down everything he was told and what he heard. Everything was happening just like as you heard in the Bible. You had the fire from the sky, you had this, you had that, and the same accounts were being told by Ipuwer. Ipuwer also said that as they were leaving Egypt, ash was falling down on them. Okay, so it took 7 days. So Nibiru was in the sky between 9 to 10 days. So it took them 7 days once they were allowed to leave to walk a certain. Actually, since you were born over there, maybe I know I gave Michael a copy of the account from Ipuwer, and he says certain ancient names, and no one has ever gotten back to me saying I know that place. But anyway, ash was falling on them. They said the ground was heaving left and right. When they got up to the saltwater marsh, they were halted by the deep water that was in the marsh. When the Hyksos Pharaoh and his troops finally caught up with them, ash was still falling. In fact, it was getting stronger. The only volcano I could research that even had any problems back then was the ancient island of Thera. Now it's called Santorini. During the just before Pharaoh went after them, they said the ground rose underneath the saltwater marsh, allowing the water to drain away. And the priest, prince, from the inner courtyard of Pharaoh led all the people running across the mud as fast as they could. But a hind-end group stayed behind, and when Pharaoh and his army went after them, they had a very mixed battle right there. Ipuwer's account said they were being slaughtered left and right. Then they were all paused Because as all this was happening, they're hearing the sound of 10,000 trumpets in their ears. Massive sound. But a truly massive sound, a massive roar, even knocked that out of the air. That was Thera exploding. Because not long after that, a massive tsunami came in and ripped up rocks from the water and killed Pharaoh and washed away the Egyptian the chariots and stuff. Now, anyone that's done any research, the chariots were found on the Red Sea bottom about 20, 25 years ago. They're all gold lined, and they date to almost exactly the end of the 17th dynasty, which was when all this happened. Akhmos I became the first Egyptian pharaoh to reunite Upper and Lower Egypt, and after a certain point in time, he created a stela. A stela is a huge stone or granite type block, and it describes everything that Akhmos I had to repair. A lot of things were undermined. If you can believe it, and it's hard to believe in today's thing, this massive, I call it displacement wave, because Thera blew itself apart. It washed over Crete, pushing Knossos' palace about 200 feet to one side. And it went straight down to Egypt, and probably a lot of other areas, but it flooded. It flooded a good part of Egypt. Okay? Now, this was all described in the Tempest Stela of Akhmos I. This stela was found. It was all broken up at one point, and they used it to fill up this one cavity area in these the brand new stuff they built. And it was actually copied back during the 1800s, and it has never been looked at. Pardon?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I was clearing my throat. Go ahead.
So in the lost book, in the Tempest Stela of Akhmos I, in Egyptian hieroglyphics, not a translation, but in the hieroglyphics, which are very easy. If you know Egyptian, you can clearly have it translated. He says all this stuff was damaged, blah, blah, blah. And oh, by the way, the pyramids had collapsed.
Well, I think those pyramids, there's something special about those things because, for one, they're all over the planet. And I think there's a reason for it. I think it has something to do with some kind of chosen people.
It was a power source.
It
was a power source. The Russians, they have several sprites coming from the top of massive thunderstorms going and discharging straight up into the atmosphere. Okay? Now, about 10, 15 years ago, NASA found out that there's actually what they call a hyperbole or a wormhole that comes from the sun, and it sends energy to each of the planets. This thing hits the Earth, and it either takes energy from the Earth or puts energy into the atmosphere. So the Anunnaki, or whomever was here a long time ago, they had the ability to use that energy that was being put up from the pyramids up into the atmosphere and from the sun to our own Earth's atmosphere, all that energy that's around our planet. That's my theory going on what has been told in Ancient Astronauts and what I've been able to research on my own.
Okay, fair enough. We've got a call. We have Ira. Ira, welcome aboard. Thanks for being patient.
Hi, guys. Oh, no problem at all. Riscala, I wanted to say definitely you're right on as far as the energy source, and you too as well, that the pyramids are definitely an energy source. I mean, the Russians actually have done some experiments with using pyramid power as well, with how it changes the emotions and the moods of people that go into them, and even things that they put into those pyramids can sort of change the energy levels of the items that go into it. So
I have a little pyramid here that Sherry and Len sent me. A nice little pyramid. It's got all kinds of metals in it.
Like an orgone kind of pyramid?
Yeah, that's an orgone generator.
Yeah, I made one of those before, and it works really well in our house as well.
Yeah, we use it.
I wanted to play devil's advocate, though, as far as this Nibiru thing goes, and kind of maybe put this out and see what your guest thinks about this. Instead of, I kind of take the viewpoint of not necessarily a planet or a sun being involved in the situation, but, well, first off, we're not actually in the Milky Way. We're actually in Sagittarius galaxy, which is crashing into the Milky Way. Science has announced that quite a few years ago, that the Milky Way is actually not where we originate from, but we're actually from the Sagittarius galaxy. We're sort of crashing together into each other. And essentially, what we're doing right now is we're going through an area of space that is much more energetically active, that there's a lot more materials, a lot more denseness to it, and that's what's causing the planets and everything around to heat up, to go, heating up, because the sun has a heliosphere that it's essentially a bubble that surrounds the whole solar system in the Oort cloud. And since we're going through this dense particle field, the sun has kind of compressed that heliosphere downwards to protect itself better, leaving the planets a little bit more exposed than what they once were. And so that could be an explanation as to what is happening planetary-wise right now. Yes, the global warming thing, we're contributing maybe a minuscule percentage towards it, but I'm sorry, your SUVs and the cows farting into the wind are not changing the climate on Mars.
I was just going to say, that's absolutely, that global warming is a big farce. I mean, there's changes happening, but it's got nothing to do with the SUVs or the airplanes or any of that stuff. It's got to do I know one thing that has to do with it, and that's what we're doing to this planet with the chemtrails and the fracking and the oil spills and the radiation. So, I mean, that's one that's affecting our weather, but there could be another outside force as well.
That's kind of what I'm contending with as well. And that as far as the Nibiru information is concerned, since we are in an active galaxy, essentially, is it possible that perhaps a rogue planetoid at some point did pass through the solar system, and that's the things that were recorded in those previous events, but that it's not actually a second sun that's happening to us or anything like that, but that we're going through this dense place in the galaxy or in the universe, essentially. I kind of wanted to get your feedback on all of that and see what you think of it.
Well, the interesting part on this is that going back to ancient history, two suns have been seen in the sky several different times. Ancient Ipuwer, he called this thing the Destroyer. And nowhere else is the Destroyer being mentioned except in relation to something that was being seen in the skies over the planet. Solon, which was part of, Plato knew him. He went to ancient Egypt and he talked to the ancient Egyptian priests, and they said he was just nothing more than a little child. He didn't know any of the ancient history, and they clearly told him that the Destroyer had been seen in the Egyptian skies or the Earth skies many times before, and each time there was basically a geological pole shift. Solon made this very clear, where the sun and the moon and the stars had all changed to different positions all three times.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Now, the ancient account from Ipuwer also says the same thing, and he clearly says that it was the Hebrews, and he clearly wishes that the Egyptians had been friendlier towards them. He calls them the Kebrus, but it's so very close to Hebrews. There's no way around that. He says that in ancient Egyptian history, the Destroyer had caused the suns and stuff to change 3 different times. That the water had come in, swept the land clean, and that all these different things happened. The growing seasons had changed. He said that when the Destroyer was overhead, all the fire that came down destroyed everything that grew. Orchards, vines, everything. And when they tried to replant stuff, the growing seasons had changed. So it threw everything off. Now, what's that got to do with this stuff now? Okay, I have the pictures from NASA clearly showing a brown dwarf and its 5 planets. I have leaked information from NASA showing 6 planets around the brown dwarf from 2009, and showing that Nibiru would be swinging through our system. It showed that it was at least 20 or 25 AUs away at that point. All that information no one wants to talk about. There's an excellent free computer program called astroviewer.com. If you go on there, you can look at all of the planets in our system, really nice. And if you click on Sedna, a dwarf planet, as it's being called, and it shows all the orbits. The orbit of Sedna is just tremendous. And just as the scientists were talking in the TV program Nemesis, our sun's evil twin, they show the exact same orbit, where Sedna, and they mention Sedna's immense orbit. Sedna, being possibly the outermost planet of Nemesis, is just way out there. And here's our little tiny system down in one corner of this massive orbit of Sedna. Exactly how our system would look according to the TV program. Now, if you take the other 6 planets and somehow work them in to Sedna's orbit and make Nibiru swing through our system between Jupiter and Mars, you've got it right there. I don't know how to do that. I had a friend years ago try to do it, and he said he had it finished. He was sending it to me, and then someone came to his place and told him, don't ever send that out again. Don't ever talk to him again. And the guy was just scared bleep.
See, I've reached out in the past because I wanted to prove this one way or the other, and I reached out in the past to lots of different astronomy groups, and I've had response from some. Some didn't want to bother with it at all. They thought it was just some big joke. But then there was some who took it on and said that, and they'd get back to me and say there's nothing there. If there was, we'd know about it. But and then I think, well, I don't know who I'm talking to on the other side either. So I'm still at that point where it's like, come on, I just want the smoking gun. I want to say, well, there it is. If that's it for sure, and yes, it is heading this way. That's
well, okay. Started writing about how the warlords back around 1600 BC were fighting amongst themselves. He said that something showed up in their skies, causing forest fires and different things around China, and 3 gods came down and allied themselves with one warlord. And to make the other warlords play down, they caused sand to fall from the skies for almost 10 days. Massive heat, massive cold, and all this other stuff, and all the warlords, they were laying on their bellies, okay? That was his account. That goes from about 1600 BC. If you go even further back, you have Emperor Yahoo, Y-A-H-O-U.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah, Yahoo.
And he talked about something coming out of the sky from the constellation Ying. I guess they had 2 constellations, one for constellation Yin and Yang, probably as the twins. And this thing caused massive forest fires, massive heat, massive cold, and the oceans topped the high mountains of China, just like in the movie 2012. And it took them 13 years to drain the salt water from the high mountain valleys back down to the rivers. And they had to send 4 teams around to even find out where north, south, east, and west was again, because everything had changed in the night sky.
See, and
Okay, well, geez, I was born and raised here in San Francisco, California. Went through the public schools. Did a little bit of college prep work at the San Mateo College for reserve police officers training, but I couldn't afford the academies. They're rather expensive. I ran for U.S. Congress as a Republican back in 1996, and again back in 1998 against Tom Lantos. Actually did pretty good the first time. I actually pulled over 126,000 votes. I started to go into researching Nibiru and the Anunnaki because of things I was seeing up on YouTube. Some of the YouTube videos back in 2006, 2007, they were showing sky coordinates, and they were showing something really interesting. A lot of these were images that were being shown on worldwide telescope from one company, from Microsoft, and then from Google Earth Sky. Back then, they actually had several nice images that were showing something that just you couldn't see because it looked like someone took a black marker to it, you know, circling around it. And I set the sky coordinates to a friend over in NASA, and he sent me back a really nice DSS image. Now, a DSS image is a image that you would see directly through a telescope. So this image was showing 5 things orbiting around nothing. Now, your listeners probably know that a DSS image cannot show a brown dwarf. Brown dwarfs can only be seen in infrared. And later I got those images. So between that and then actually stumbling into NASA recording these massive, now technically all I can say is they are anomalies / UFOs. That's exactly what they call them on the internet. I can call them what I want, and I can call them that they're actually massive motherships coming into our system. NASA has been recording these things and other things since 1998 with their SOHO satellite, which is 4 times the distance away from the Earth of the Moon. So 4 times the distance of the Moon to the Earth's out there in a Lagrange point. These are multi-million-dollar or billion-dollar camera systems. They're not like what you or I would carry in our hand and look up in the sky. Oh, that's a nice white object. That's a UFO. No, these are very good images. And NASA has been cleaning up all the glitches on SOHO up until 2012. Yeah, and supposedly these things should not be seen anymore.
And don't forget, they just landed a some kind of orb of some sort, or
it was a probe.
A probe. I'm sorry. Yeah. On an asteroid, I think it was, right? Or a comet.
And it was a comet. Way the heck out there that supposedly took them 10 years to even get there. And that shows how good our technology has come, either because we did it on our own, which I would like to believe, but I'm sorry, I don't believe all of it. Reverse engineering of the stuff that we have found since Roswell clearly shows that we have other things that make NASA look like little child's play.
Well, Robert, what do you think could be the real reason they're so anxious to land on a comet? Could it be that comet is in the vicinity of what they're trying to see?
I honestly don't know. I would probably be just really super guessing right now, and I really hate doing that with all the stuff that I want your listeners to even try and listen to me about. I'm not going to tell them that they should believe this, but I want to put it in their brains to think about it. You know, so many things are happening. So many things have happened since 1954. 1955 with the Vatican, the Jesuits, Jesuit leaks, a former pope which just resigned, complaining about the Jesuits and their ET agenda, which backs up everything that was leaked in the early 2000s about a high-ranking Jesuit priest telling everything to an Italian reporter. You're just barely touching on everything that's around here, I swear.
Yeah.
So just go ahead and ask me some questions. I'll answer them as best way I can.
All right. Well, I guess I'll ask the obvious question.